Your spouse is having an affair. It hurts. And all kinds of questions are going through your mind, including, why? Why is this happening? How could it happen? Is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with my husband, my wife? Is the world just going absolutely crazy? And then there are a lot of people in your world that are giving you all kinds of answers, trying to explain to you why your spouse is doing this or that or the other. And unfortunately, a lot of what they're telling you is wrong, and it certainly is not helpful. Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Beam. Let's talk about it. How do you understand your spouse when he's having an affair? By the way, if you like what we do with these videos, you see down there where you can subscribe, click that button. And when you do click that button, you'll be getting updates on all the videos that we do. We talk about affairs, of course, but many other things as well about relationships. And we'd love to have you get those videos when they come out. Now, we're back to you. This particular situation. How do you understand your spouse when he or she is having an affair? I'll try to help understand that in just a moment, but I guess the first question you should ask yourself is this. Is my spouse a good person doing a bad thing or a bad person doing a bad thing? Because I'm saying that an affair is a bad thing, and I'm sure that you, since you're the one being cheated on, feel the same way, that I don't like this. This is bad. My husband, my wife should not be doing this, and I would agree wholeheartedly. But if you're going to try to figure out why he or she is doing it, and that's almost implying that you want to fix this. And I'm all for people fixing their marriages, even when their spouse is having an affair. That's why our nonprofit exists. But sometimes you need to ask that question up front, the one I just gave you, because if indeed your spouse is a bad person, what I mean by that is that he or she, for a long period of time, has demonstrated no integrity. They have done one bad thing after another, almost from the time that you've been married. You cannot trust him or her ever. Now, don't confuse that with the fact that whatever he or she is doing right now is a bad thing. And if you just focus on what he or she's doing right now, you're going to say, bad person. But think beyond that. Think about who he or she was when you married, who he or she has been during the course of your marriage. If indeed your spouse is a good person at heart, not right now, because he or she's doing this thing that's hurting you. But if your spouse is at heart a good person, then this marriage is likely worth rescuing. No, it's your choice. Obviously, if your spouse is cheating on you, if you want to, you can divorce him or her. But if you choose to try to rescue this marriage, then it makes sense to try to understand why he or she is doing what he or she is doing. Oh, and by the way, as you make this analysis about whether my spouse is a good person doing a bad thing or a bad person doing a bad thing, avoid false diagnosis. You say, what do you mean by that? There are a lot of people in your world, and a lot more on the internet, particularly in the social media groups, who'll have all the answers about why your husband or wife is doing what he or she's doing and what's going to happen next and what you should do, and you should avoid those people because they're going to be diagnosing your spouse, and most of them don't even know who he or she is. And even the people that are close to you, the ones who love you, maybe your parents, your siblings, close, dear friends, they'll be making some diagnoses as well. But be careful about trusting those because, you see, they love you, and you're now hurt, which means they're going to be angry at the person that has hurt you, and they're going to be quite judgmental to do. And so if you're trying to decide if my spouse is a good person or a bad person doing this thing, don't let other people tell you what that is. Not strangers, not friends, not loved ones. Oh, and be careful, please be careful, about trying to make your own diagnosis from what you read on the internet. Recently, a lady, and she's a good person, and I'm not trying to make her sound bad with what I'm about to tell you that she did, but she heard one word that she thought applied to her husband, so she started looking up on the internet, and reading about that word led her to another word, the particular word narcissist, for example, and she read all the stuff she could read about that, and then she decided that he must be a narcissist based on what she had read on the internet. And then she read that most narcissists are into things like pornography, and therefore she decided he must be. Look, only a professional who has had several visits with a person, a professional who's been trained and qualified and knows what he or she is doing, after several sessions, can that professional, that therapist, that counselor, for example, diagnose somebody as being narcissistic. You can't do it just by reading what they say on the internet. Your friends certainly can't do it. Oh, speaking of counselors, be careful if they do it if they haven't done several sessions with your spouse. We hear it all the time. My counselor says my spouse is a narcissist. Really, how many sessions did your therapist have with your spouse? Oh, has not met my spouse, but just based on what I said, my spouse is a narcissist. If ever you have a counselor or a therapist, any professional do something like that, run. Get away. Run as fast as you can, because not only is that person not truly professional, they're not ethical. So please don't let other people determine what you think when you ask that question, is my husband or wife a good person doing a bad thing or a bad person doing a bad thing? Trust your gut. Look at the life experiences you've had together so far. And if you make that judgment, no, this is a good person, then he or she is worth rescuing. And believe it or not, if you can rescue this marriage, your marriage will be even better after the affair than it was before. No, not because of the affair, but because of what both of you will learn from this. Now, I'm assuming that if your spouse is having the affair, it's going to be one where he or she thinks and feels that he or she is madly in love with another person. If you say, no, this is not real, you are not madly in love with him or her, that's not going to work very well. You need to understand that typically people in this situation have something that is called limerence. If you subscribe down there, for example, you can find out that we have a whole lot of videos explaining this thing called limerence. Those will not make you a limerence specialist or expert, but they can give you a lot of insight into it. Oh, and by the way, if you watch those videos, don't drag your spouse in and watch that, because that's you. That's going to work against you. Understand that it is an identifiable kind of love. Now, I know you don't want to hear that. And it's not the kind of love that you guys have. It's not the kind of love that you can have if you get past this. But in the social sciences, we can actually identify it as a kind of love. Here's something you need to understand about your spouse, though. If he or she is in this limerence state, if they feel madly in love with this other person, the person that you're seeing is not in control of his or her emotions. As a matter of fact, not really actually in control with his or her intellect. What I mean by that is they tend to have obsessive thinking. They daydream about the other person. They fantasize about a future with the other person. And this powerful emotion takes control, which means that for a while, that person that you thought you knew so well is a temporary stranger. Not just to you, like, who are you? You're not the person I married, but actually a stranger to themselves, because they're not thinking the way they used to. They're not feeling the way they used to. Now, there's some brain chemicals involved. Don't have time to explain all this here, but there's some brain chemicals involved that actually lead them to become somebody else for a period of time, where they do things they didn't normally do. They think things they didn't used to think. They feel things more intensely, at least they believe, than they have ever felt them in their lives. But here's what you need to understand. While they're not in control, while these things are happening inside of him or her, and you're trying to figure out why, who, what, when, where, your spouse can't even answer all those questions. And some of the things you'll ask why about, the answers they give you aren't going to be accurate, because they're so confused emotionally in here that they're not really clear about it either. But change is coming. That kind of intense, quote, madly in love, this thing we call limerence in the social sciences, is relatively short-lived. It's going to last somewhere between 3 months and, on average, at the longest, 48 months. I know that sounds like forever, but 48 months is about the end, and not many go that far. It's going to be typically somewhere in between there. Like if you think of a curve between 3 months and 48 months, it's typically somewhere in there that it finally is going to go away. And so what you see now that he or she is feeling, and what they actually honestly do feel, it's actually inside them. They're feeling these things, and they're not in control of it. It's going to change. At some point, it's going to go away. Now, if you've made the decision, I think my husband, my wife is a good person, I'd like to rescue this relationship, let me give you some things to do. Number one is accept the fact that your spouse feels this way. I mean, you can try to explain to him or her all day long that they don't. You lose all credibility because they do. And denying it is not going to do you any good. Railing against it isn't going to help anybody. And so if you really want to put this marriage back together, and if you believe, hey, this is a good person doing a bad thing, I want to rescue this marriage because, as Dr. Beam just told me, at some point this is going to end, and it will. The first thing you do is you accept this is what she feels right now. But then, at the same time, don't believe everything that he or she says. They do feel those emotions, but some of the things they're going to say aren't really accurate. Oh, they believe them. Don't misunderstand. They're not just outright lying. They believe them right now. But it's being driven by those emotions, those brain chemicals, and it will change. For example, they may be attacking you, saying all kinds of mean, terrible, vicious things about you. And you think, is that what you've always thought of me? And he or she may say, yes, I've always felt that way about you. But they haven't. They may say things such as, I'd be better off if I never have married you. Oh, or things like, I'm such a terrible, wicked person that you'd be much better off if you divorced me. They'll say all kinds of things about themselves, about the other person they're involved with, about you, about the world, about God, church, anything that comes into their minds. And they're not lying because that's what's happening in their head, but it doesn't mean it's the truth. It's what's happening in his or her head. So while you accept what he or she feels, don't believe everything that he or she says. What you really want to do, if you want to put this thing back together, is work on this thing we call PIES, P-I-E-S. It stands for physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. I'm almost out of time on this video, so I can't explain in great detail what those are here. But again, if you subscribe, you can find other videos that we have done, will do, and continue to do about such things as PIES and how it attracts the other person to you, and how, most importantly in the situation we're discussing right here, it helps you be the best person you can possibly be. Now, can't explain it right here, but you can find it right down there. Basically what it says is you work on you and become the best you that you can possibly be. That's important. Now, that doesn't mean it's your fault that he or she's involved in this other thing. But it does say if you want to put this marriage back together, you become the best you can possibly be. Oh, and here's a tough one. Be a safe place. What that means is if your spouse does open up and talk to you, if that's still happening, rather than arguing, rather than beating him or her up verbally or emotionally, be safe. You can say things such as, I hate the fact that you feel that way. You can even demonstrate the fact that you're hurting if you are, like, oh, that hurts. But if you excessively cry, if you get extremely emotional, they're not going to be telling you the truth or even anything, whether true or not anymore, because they're afraid of your negative reaction. So it's okay to be human, but in that humanity, if you can, you try to hear what the other person's saying by being that safe place. And rather than attacking, you let him or her know, I really understand. I do. I understand what you feel. You don't necessarily agree as to how they got there, or it's good that they're there. Don't agree with that. But understand, and I get it. I understand how you feel. I accept the fact that you feel that way. That's a safe place. Again, a much bigger topic. Other videos we have about that. Check those things out. You see, here's the principle. People don't leave what they have unless they believe what they're going to is better. People don't leave what they have unless they believe what they're going to is better. What that means is, at least in your spouse's mind right now, the fact they're having that affair with that other person, assuming it's a relationship affair, that they actually feel in love with the other person, it's because they believe being with him or her is better than being with you. Ouch, I know that hurts. I don't mean to be mean, but we have to deal in reality. We can't work in a fantasy land here. The reality is that he or she believes being with that person is better than being with you. So what do? You can't stop that. You work on you and become the best you that you can be. If you need help with that, we're glad to do it. You can check out our website at Marriage Helper. That's marriagehelper.com. You can call the number you see on the screen there. Oh, and by the way, if you have further questions about this, down in the comment section in there, write your questions. If you've been through this and want to share with other people what you've learned, write it right down there in the comment section here. We'd love to see what you have to say or the questions you have to ask so that maybe we can make more videos. Because remember, we do care and we can help.